Nathan was in the middle of treating a miner's plasma burn when his door chime rang for the 5th time in 10 minutes. He'd been ignoring it, but whoever was outside had persistence bordering on obsession. "Unless you're bleeding or on fire, come back later," he called out. The door opened anyway. "Station override code." Nathan looked up, irritated, and found Eshari. He'd learned her name from the medical reports, standing in his doorway with young Kael at her side. Behind them stood 3 elderly Thurin, dressed in formal robes that seemed too elaborate for a frontier colony station. "Mr. Cross," Eshari said, her standard precise but accented. "We must speak with you. It is of greatest importance." The miner on his exam table looked between Nathan and the visitors with obvious curiosity. "I can come back," he offered. "Yeah, do that. Come by tomorrow." Nathan sealed the bandage and waited until the miner left. Then he turned to his unexpected guests. "Look, if this is about medical follow-up for Kael, you should really see Dr. Yima." "This is not medical," one of the elders interrupted. The elderly Thurin woman stepped forward, her elongated ears adorned with intricate silver bands. "I am Elder Miss Ra. We come regarding the essence bond you have formed with Eshari's family line." Nathan blinked. "The what now?" Eshari spoke softly. "When you gave your blood to save my son, you created a bond recognized by our oldest laws. You gave your essence, your life force, to sustain another. This is not a small thing among my people. I gave some blood for a transfusion. That's pretty standard human medicine." Nathan looked at the serious faces surrounding him and felt his stomach sink. "Isn't it?" Elder Miss Ra shook her head. "Among the Thurin, to share essence is to bind lives. You are now connected to Eshari's family under the law of essence bond. You are recognized as protector, guardian, and family member." Nathan laughed, the sound coming out more nervous than amused. "Okay, look, I appreciate the ceremonial gratitude, but I was just doing my job. You don't owe me anything." "This is not about owing," another elder said, a male with deep lines around his eyes. "This is about what is. The bond exists whether you understand it or not. It has been registered in our databases. It is recognized across 17 star systems that honor Thurin law." "Registered?" Nathan's voice went up an octave. "What do you mean, registered?" Eshari moved closer, and Kael pressed against her side, watching Nathan with huge eyes. "You are now listed as Kael's secondary guardian, as bonded protector of my family. This carries legal weight in treaties between Thurin worlds and human colonies." Nathan sat down heavily on his exam stool. "Let me get this straight. I donated blood to save a kid, and now I'm legally part of your family." "Yes," Eshari said simply, "and there's no way to undo this." The elders exchanged glances. Elder Miss Ra spoke gently. "The bond, once formed through freely given essence, cannot be dissolved. It is not a contract. It is a recognition of reality." "This is insane." Nathan ran his hands through his hair. "I'm a mediocre EMT who can barely keep himself alive. I'm not qualified to be anyone's guardian or protector or whatever you're calling it." "The essence does not lie," the male elder said. "You gave of yourself when you had no obligation. That reveals character." Kael suddenly spoke up, his voice small but clear. "Keeper Nathan saved me. Mama said you gave your life water so mine wouldn't stop." Nathan looked at the kid's earnest face and felt his resistance waver. But this was too much, too fast, too permanent. "Eshari," he said carefully, "I'm glad your son is alive. Really, but I didn't sign up for a lifelong commitment. I have a job, a life." "Which continues," Eshari interrupted. "The bond does not imprison, it connects. I will provide for you as you provided for my son. I will protect you as you protected him. This is how family works among my people." "But I'm not your people." "You are now." She said it with such certainty that Nathan couldn't find words to argue. "I know this is strange to you. Your culture does not have such bonds. But give me time to show you what this means. Let me prove that obligation can become something valued." The elders began a formal recitation in Thurin. and Nathan's implant translated fragments. Binding of blood, protection of essence, family recognized under stars and law. It sounded like poetry and felt like a trap closing around him. When they finally left, Nathan sat alone in his quarters and tried to process what had just happened. His casual act of kindness had apparently bound him to an alien family with laws he didn't understand and obligations he'd never agreed to. He pulled up the station's legal database and searched for information on Thurin Essence bonds. What he found made his situation very clear. The bonds were absolutely recognized in interspecies law, could not be annulled, and carried mutual obligations of protection and provision. "Well," Nathan said to his empty room, "that's just fantastic." His door chimed again. He seriously considered ignoring it, but Kael's voice came through. "Keeper Nathan, Mama made extra food. She said you must eat to restore your essence." Nathan opened the door to find the boy holding a container that smelled surprisingly good. Behind him, down the corridor, Eshari stood watching with an expression Nathan couldn't quite read. He took the food, managed a weak smile at Kael, and closed the door. As he ate what turned out to be some kind of spiced grain dish, he had the disturbing realization that his life had just gotten exponentially more complicated. And there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. The next 3 weeks were an exercise in persistent culture shock. Eshari appeared at Nathan's quarters every morning with food. Real food, not the synthesized protein blocks the station dispensary served. She mended the tear in his jacket he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. She somehow got the climate control in his quarters working properly for the first time since he'd arrived at the station. When Nathan protested, Eshari simply said, "You are family. Family cares for each other." Kael had apparently decided Nathan was the most interesting person on the station. The kids showed up after Nathan's shifts, chattering in a mix of Thurin and broken standard about his day, asking endless questions about human medicine and earth animals, and whether it was true that humans ate something called ice cream that made their heads hurt. "That's brain freeze, kid, and yeah, totally worth it," Nathan found himself explaining while trying to inventory medical supplies. "Can I have brain freeze?" Kael asked with heartbreaking seriousness. "Ask your mom." "Mama says you are keeper, you can decide." Nathan stopped counting bandages. "That's not how this works. Your mom is still your mom. I'm just," he paused. What was he? "I'm just someone who helped out once." "You gave me life water," Kael said, as if this explained everything. Maybe it did, in Thurin logic. Nathan started researching Thurin culture in his spare time, mostly so he could understand what he'd gotten himself into. The more he learned, the more complicated it became. The Thurin had evolved on a planet where resources were scarce and threats were constant. Survival depended on absolute trust within family units. When someone gave blood, literally shared their essence, it was treated as the ultimate act of trust and sacrifice. The law of essence bond wasn't a quirky tradition. It was foundational to their entire civilization. One evening, after Eshari had delivered another meal and quietly left, Nathan worked up the courage to actually talk to her. He found her in one of the station's observation decks, watching the stars through the reinforced viewport. "Can we talk?" he asked. She turned, her expression careful. "Of course, Nathan. Why are you really doing all this? The food, the help, the constant presence." Eshari considered her answer. "Among my people, the bond is sacred. But more than that, you saved my son when there was no reason for you to. When it cost you pain and recovery time. When you had nothing to gain. That reveals who you are." "I was just doing my job." "No. Your job was to treat injuries. You volunteered to be harmed so another might live. That is not duty, that is character." She moved closer. "I lost my bondmate 3 years ago, an accident during a mining survey. Since then Kael and I have been alone. Thurin society values family units. Being incomplete, it is difficult. And now you're not incomplete because I got voluntold into this." Nathan couldn't keep the bitterness out of his voice. You think this is only for my benefit. Eshari's voice sharpened. Nathan, I have watched you for these weeks. You live alone. You eat poorly. Your quarters were in disrepair until I fixed them. You treat your own well-being as irrelevant. The bond works both directions. You provide protection and I provide care. Both of us gain. I never asked for care. Perhaps that is precisely why you need it. Eshari's expression softened. I know you did not choose this, but it exists nonetheless. I am asking you to give it time. Let me show you that family is not always burden. Nathan looked out at the stars, feeling exhausted by more than just long shifts. In human culture, we get to choose our families, or at least we're supposed to. And has that freedom made you happy? The question hit harder than Nathan expected. He thought about his life before the transfusion, functional, professional, completely empty of meaningful connection. He'd left Earth to escape feeling unimportant. Frontier medicine was supposed to give his life purpose. Instead, he'd found himself just as isolated, just as convinced he didn't matter. I don't know how to be what you need, he admitted quietly. You already are, Eshari said. You exist, you live, you care enough to question. That is sufficient. They stood in silence for a while. Finally, Nathan asked, what does keeper actually mean? Kael keeps calling me that. It is a term for someone who guards life, someone trusted with the essence of family. Eshari's ears twitched in what Nathan had learned was equivalent to a smile. Also, it is what small children call their secondary guardians when protector bonded by sacred essence is too many syllables. Nathan surprised himself by laughing. That's actually kind of funny. We Thurin can appreciate humor. We simply do not make jokes about family bonds. Noted. I'll keep my sarcasm focused on station coffee and medical supply requisitions. Eshari's expression grew serious again. Some in the Thurin community here question whether a human can honor the bond. They say your people are too individualistic, too quick to abandon obligations. I have told them you are different. What if they're right? What if I'm terrible at this? Then we learn together. Bonds are not forged perfectly. They are built over time. She placed a hand over her heart in a Thurin gesture Nathan had seen before. You have already shown you understand the most important thing, that some lives are worth your own pain. Everything else can be taught. Nathan left the observation deck feeling like something had shifted in his understanding. The bond was still strange, still overwhelming, still something he'd never asked for. But maybe Eshari was right. Maybe obligation could become something else if he stopped fighting it long enough to see what it might grow into. That night, when Kael showed up with a drawing he'd made of Keeper Nathan fighting the bad blood sickness, the mining accident happened during Nathan's 4th week of bonded family life. An explosion in the lower levels, structural collapse, 17 people trapped including 3 Thurin families. All available personnel mobilized, and Nathan found himself working alongside Eshari in the disaster response. He hadn't known she was an engineer. Apparently, there were a lot of things about her he still didn't know. They worked for hours in the dark, unstable tunnels. Eshari directed structural reinforcement while Nathan treated the injured. The air was thick with dust and the metallic smell of ruptured piping. At one point, a secondary collapse started, and Nathan's body moved before his brain caught up. He grabbed Kael, who'd somehow ended up in the disaster zone looking for his mother, and shielded the kid with his own body as debris rained down. When the dust settled, Nathan was bruised and bleeding from a dozen places. Kael was completely unharmed, crying but alive. I told you to stay in the safe zone, Nathan said, his voice shaking. I couldn't find Mama, Kael sobbed. Eshari appeared through the dust like a ghost, her face streaked with soot. She saw Nathan covering her son, saw the blood running down his arm, and something in her expression cracked. Kael, stay with healer Yima. Now. Her tone brooked no argument. Once Kael was safely away, she turned to Nathan. You are injured. Cuts and bruises, the kid needed. You protected him. Eshari's hands were shaking as she examined his wounds. You placed yourself between danger and my son, without hesitation. Yeah, well, that's what you do for family, right? Nathan said it before he realized what he was admitting. Eshari stopped moving. She looked at him, really looked at him, and Nathan saw tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. Say that again. What? You called him family. Nathan opened his mouth to take it back, to make it a joke, to rebuild his walls. But standing there in the wreckage with his arm bleeding and his body aching and the certain knowledge that he'd have done the same thing again without question, he couldn't. I guess I did, he said quietly. They finished the rescue operation. All 17 trapped workers survived, though several needed extensive medical care. Nathan worked until his legs gave out, then sat down hard on a pile of debris while someone else took over triage. Eshari found him there an hour later. She had a medical kit and cleaned his wounds with gentle, efficient hands. Nathan was too exhausted to protest. I fought this, he said into the silence. The bond. I resented it, felt trapped by it. I know, but somewhere in there I stopped fighting. I don't know when it happened. Eshari finished bandaging his arm. Bonds are like that. One day they are chains. The next day they are simply part of who you are. I'm still not good at this family thing. You threw yourself over my son during a collapse. I would say you understand family perfectly. She sat beside him on the debris pile, their shoulders touching. The bond works both ways, Nathan. You protect us, I protect you. That is how it should be. You sound worried. About protecting me specifically. I am. You are reckless with your own safety. It frightens me. Nathan laughed despite his exhaustion. That's rich, coming from someone who was redirecting structural supports in an active collapse zone. For my work, not as a volunteer, but there was warmth in her voice now. They sat together as the rescue crews finished securing the area. Eventually, Kael found them and climbed into Nathan's lap without asking permission, his small body still trembling from fear. You saved me again, Keeper, he whispered. Yeah, well, I have this thing about kids getting crushed by debris, major pet peeve. Nathan awkwardly patted Kael's back, unsure of the correct protocol for comforting traumatized alien children. Eshari watched them with an expression Nathan was learning to recognize, fierce protectiveness mixed with something softer. Pride, maybe, or hope. A week later, the Thurin elders requested Nathan's presence at a formal ceremony. He almost refused, still uncomfortable with ritual and attention, but Eshari asked him to attend. For her. The ceremony took place in the station's largest meeting room, decorated with Thurin banners and filled with people Nathan vaguely recognized from his medical work. Elder Miss Ra stood at the front, wearing robes that shimmered with embedded light threads. Nathan Cross, she intoned, you have lived the bond. You have protected Essence family with your own body. You have honored obligations you did not choose. Today, we formally recognize your place among us. Nathan stood awkwardly while the elders recited blessings in Thurin. Then Eshari stepped forward, placing her hands over his in a gesture he'd learned meant trust given freely. Do you accept the bond? She asked. Not as obligation but as choice, not as burden but as connection. Nathan looked at her face, at Kael standing beside her with solemn pride, at the gathered Thurin watching with a mix of curiosity and respect. He thought about meals delivered every morning, repairs made without asking, a kid who called him Keeper and drew him pictures and trusted him completely. He thought about his life before, empty, isolated, convinced he didn't matter to anyone. I'm terrible at long-term commitments, he said, which made several Thurin shift uncomfortably. Then he smiled. But yeah, I accept. Family, connection, all of it. Eshari's ears trembled with emotion. She spoke in formal Thurin, and Nathan's implant translated. Protector of my heart's blood, guardian of my son's essence, I bind myself to your well-being as you have bound yourself to ours. That sounds way more poetic than anything I just said, Nathan muttered. You have eternity to improve, Eshari replied, and Nathan realized with shock that she was joking. The ceremony concluded with food, and something the Thurin called essence wine that tasted like starlight and made Nathan's head spin pleasantly. Kael stayed glued to his side, explaining various Thurin customs with the authority of someone who'd memorized them just for this purpose. Later, standing with Eshari on the observation deck that had become their informal meeting place, Nathan watched the stars and felt something he'd nearly forgotten: contentment. "I still don't fully understand this," he admitted. "The bond, the laws, what it all means long-term." "Neither do I," Eshari said. "Bonds between species are rare. We are creating something new." "No pressure. We have time. Thurin live approximately 140 Earth years. You have time to learn." Nathan's head whipped around. "Wait, how long do you live?" "I just told you. I'm going to be ancient before you're middle-aged." Eshari's expression softened. "All the more reason not to waste the time we have." They stood together in comfortable silence. Kael had fallen asleep in one of the observation chairs, his small body curled up like he felt completely safe. Nathan realized that he felt the same way. "Thank you," Eshari said quietly. "For what?" "For giving us your essence, for giving us your presence, for choosing us when you did not have to." Nathan thought about his answer carefully. "I think you chose me first, the moment you registered that bond, but somewhere along the way I chose you back." "Is that your version?"